looking for opinions from older men about the new generation or current men in their mid to late 20s. I have always attracted people who smoke cannabis, even though I don't like doing it myself. I give off a chill vibe, whatever that means. I am a 23-year-old woman talking to a 25-year-old man who smokes almost every day but does not fit the typical cannabis user stereotype. If someone has a job and is working towards their future, should cannabis use be seen as something negative? Is smoking every day a reasonable response to the state of the world? At what age does smoking become stigmatized by other men? Story 1. I view it the same as drinking. Would I date someone who socially drinks or has a drink a couple of days a week to relax? Yes. Would I date someone who drinks all day every day or requires it to function? No. Story 2. I smoked cannabis from the time I was 14 until I was 35. I used to smoke it constantly. During that time, I graduated high school with honors. I have always had a full-time job working more than 40 hours per week, often over 50 hours. I got married, fathered, and helped raise 2 children. I bought a house and never missed a payment on anything. When I got divorced, I quit smoking. My ex turned out to be an alcoholic narcissist who was apparently also bipolar. I quit because I decided my children needed one parent who was sober and clear-minded all of the time. I never saw cannabis as bad or evil even after I quit. I was clean for 20 years. During that time, I voted to legalize cannabis in my state even though I had no intention of ever smoking it again. It has been legal here for a few years now. 3 years ago, I started smoking again. I am older now. I have built my life and I feel successful. My children are grown, functional adults. I was going through some difficulties and decided something needed to change. How I see things, how my mind works. I wasn't happy. I didn't enjoy my life. I was depressed. While I do not recommend using cannabis, alcohol, or any other drug for this purpose, I didn't know what else to do. It helped me a lot. Things are much better now. I smoke every day. I started caring about myself again. I have gotten healthier. I lost weight. I have more energy. I am more sexually active. I look good, I feel good, and I am happy. Story 3. I have no problem with other people smoking marijuana in general. If it does not negatively affect them or those around them, who cares? If it does negatively affect them or those around them, then obviously it has become a problem. But that is true for anything. Marijuana affects everyone differently. It does not turn everyone into a couch potato. Some people are perfectly functional using it. Story 4. There is a level of marijuana smoking where it impedes your ability to meaningfully contribute to a partnership or your general pursuit of goals and ambitions. That level is different for everyone. I know some of the most successful people in my degree programs over the years were absolutely functional daily marijuana users. People were setting curves off that habit. Most people who smoke a lot of marijuana should be relatively curious about how that behavior interacts with their life, ambitions, ability to be a good partner, and their capacity to show up for others. If you do not think their marijuana use impedes their ability to be a functional adult, or in fact enhances it, I know many unmedicated attention deficit hyperactivity disorder individuals who use marijuana daily as a form of self-medication, then maybe you are fine with it. If you are not into people who use marijuana regularly, it is totally fine to excuse yourself from the relationship over it. It is a compatibility and lifestyle matter for many people. Story 5. Used to view pot smokers as lazy hippies. Now I partake in microdosing on the weekend, so I am not so uptight or upset all the time with other 50-year-old professionals. I still hate the smell of it and hate smoking it. Story 6. I am a 42-year-old and a casual user a couple of weekends a month these days. My advice is probably a bit biased, but I will give it a shot anyway. If someone can use cannabis and still keep their life together, I do not see it as a problem. I would rather be with cannabis users than people who drink excessively any day of the week. As for coping with the world, I do not see it as any different from people who go to the pub every evening or sit at home with a couple of nice glasses of wine. I have never had any negative responses to being under the influence in public regardless of age. Most of the judgment seems to be if you are using it in places where you really should not, such as pretty much anywhere public. I have neighbors who are completely against the heavy cannabis user 3 houses down, who cannot have failed to notice the same smells coming from my house, even though I try my best to make sure it vents out the back windows upstairs. I am not naive. The substance has a strong odor, and wind will pull smoke into unusual corners. Yet they all treat me just fine. I think it is mostly how you go about it, not that you do it. Story 7. Keep in mind cannabis affects everyone differently. For some people, cannabis helps them relax and focus. It makes others lazy and unmotivated. Is it negatively affecting his life? I would not worry if he is a functioning, responsible adult. If he stays home every day and does not work, I would consider that a red flag. Story 8. I know occasional cannabis users, habitual users, and everyday users. None of them matches the stoner stereotype. I don't judge anyone for using cannabis, smoking, vaping, taking edibles or tinctures, whatever, as long as it doesn't interfere with their daily life. I know some people who found that cannabis was the only thing that relieved chronic conditions without side effects, so judging them for that would be like judging an epileptic for taking anti-seizure medication. Story 9. I used to smoke daily for about 15 years, and it became a big part of my life and unmanageable. I found a reason to quit entirely 7 months ago when my wife was pregnant with our first child. I realized I had an addiction that I could not control, and I did not want to raise my daughter in a home with a prevalent addiction. Everyone is different, and I see the benefits and risks of smoking marijuana. For me, I realized I could not handle it. Some can, and that is okay, but I think many people use it as a crutch which can hold them back from realizing their true potential. To quote Ordell Robbie, portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson in Quentin Tarantino's film Jackie Brown, that marijuana will rob you of your ambitions. Story 10. I've been told I give off chill and nice guy vibes and have had similar problems. I don't smoke and I'm allergic to it too. It has caused many breakups. Cigarette smoke is horrible and weed smoke is even worse. I get annoyed around cigarette smoke in public but become more angry and offended by weed smoke in public. It ruins the atmosphere during a vacation stay if it is constantly wafting in the area or seeping through walls. Smoke in general, but especially weed smoke, has instantly caused me to stop signing deals on apartments or other agreements. For what it's worth, I would fight for anyone's freedom to smoke, but I would just as strongly fight for it to be smoked more privately where it is not a public nuisance. Seriously, smoke all you want, but have some consideration for those around you and the places you do it. Story 11. It just cannot be your whole focus, but I do not see a problem if someone has everything taken care of. Stay positive, family. Story 12. I smoked cannabis steadily in the 1970s and 1980s. Then, as a working, married man for 30 years, I only used it occasionally, once or twice a year. Now, I am retired and back to daily use. For me, there is no way I could use cannabis daily while maintaining a career and family. Some people do it and are very successful, perhaps more creative types. But I have always wondered if they could have done more without it. This is just my experience, but I cannot have cannabis around the house without feeling the urge to use it. It's pretty much all or nothing. I am glad to be back to a place where I can enjoy a good wake and bake at 60 plus. Story 13. My opinion is that as long as you have your priorities straight, there is nothing wrong with indulging in nearly any substances. Of course, practice harm reduction whenever possible, and never lose sight of what is really important. Male in his mid-30s with a house, wife, multiple pets, and extensive drug experience. Story 14. As another person has said, I view it similarly to drinking. It's their life. They can live how they want as long as they are not infringing on other people. Regarding jobs and careers, that is a bit tougher. Some jobs have an absolute zero-tolerance policy with regard to that, while others tolerate it. Smoking while working is generally a no-go for most places, just like drinking would be. In terms of relationships, I would not care if my partner smoked once in a while. If it was an everyday thing, I think it would wear on me. That is just a guess, though. Smoking is not for me. It makes me too paranoid, so I would be dealing with how they act when high in the smell, unless they solely use edibles. Story 15. It's fine as long as you don't make it your personality and as long as you don't start making excuses to do it. I can stop. I just need the bedtime one and obviously the one in the morning and always after a meal, That's a given. But I can stop anytime I want. Story 16. I have been smoking on and off for over 30 years. Probably made me less intelligent starting in my teens, but I am successful, and it has not held me back otherwise. Story 17. As a mental health professional, I can tell you without exaggeration that it genuinely impairs cognitive function. If people choose to use cannabis or alcohol, that is their prerogative, but note that these substances impair memory, focus, and overall mental clarity. I have seen it firsthand, and the research supports this. My main advice is to steer clear of cannabis and alcohol. Story 18. Sounds like they are functionally a normal person, even an overachiever maybe. If they smoke every day and still get things done, what does it matter to me? Why should it matter to anyone else? Story 19. I used to love it. Now I cannot because of adverse side effects. If those went away, would I go back to smoking? No. I am totally sober now, including alcohol, and I would not have it any other way. Do I care if other people smoke? No. I just try not to hang around them often. Dating-wise, that would be tricky. I think I am past that part of my life and do not really want it in my life at this point. No hate, just the boundary I have set for myself that is best for me. Story 20. I have smoked cannabis almost every day since I was 24. I am 34 now. Took me a while to find a healthy balance, and I think that is where most daily users struggle. You have to set limits and boundaries that work with your daily life. For me, that means no smoking before work. I make sure to spend time with my wife, check in with my pets, and get my workout in before I even think about lighting up. I also try not to smoke so much that anxiety creeps in. Sometimes I even ask myself, do I want to dream tonight? Before I decide to smoke. Lately, my relationship with cannabis is shifting. I am currently under review for a promotion that would allow me to work from home, but it comes with more accountability and a large territory to manage. That kind of responsibility will require more focus and structure, which will likely change how and when I use it. More importantly, I am about to become a father, and that has made me reflect deeply. I am prepared to fully quit until my son is older because I want to be fully present for him. I am not here to promote cannabis or any drug. Drugs can absolutely help some people manage their mental health, but you have to be real with yourself. If you are using something to check out or avoid what is in front of you, it can easily become a crutch. Any kind of drug use should be intentional. The moment it becomes unconscious, that is when it starts becoming a problem and eventually a dependency. Story 21. I view it the same as alcohol. If you use it every day to function, then you have a problem. I would not date a habitual alcohol user who drinks every day, and the same goes for a cannabis user. If you use cannabis a couple of times on the weekend, then that is okay. If you use it every day to function, then no. Plus, you would smell unpleasant. I cannot stand the smell of a habitual cannabis user. They can walk into a room, and their smell lingers for hours. It is disgusting. If you use cannabis every day, then you smell like that whether you realize it or not. It reminds me of the same smell as a homeless person, but stronger. Story 22. I don't care that people do it. I don't myself. I do care how ridiculously public it has become. I don't want to smell that. I have vacation rental properties, and somehow people seem to think it's appropriate to smoke indoors. It's crazy. I'm 47 years old. For what it's worth. I wish I liked it, but it has never done anything for me. I like my alcohol but don't like the hangovers. Tried some edibles, but they are nothing like alcohol. Inhaling cannabis smoke never did anything for me. Story 23. Outside of medical reasons, it is a huge turn-off. If you do it at home and do not have to interact with me in any way, sure, I do not know, you do you. I am just not compatible with weed or drug users. This quote from South Park explains my feelings pretty well. Well, Stan, the truth is marijuana probably is not going to make you kill people, and it most likely is not going to fund terrorism, but, well, son, pot makes you feel fine with being bored, and it is when you are bored that you should be learning some new skill or discovering some new science or being creative. If you smoke pot, you may grow up to find out that you are not good at anything. Story 24. Why would someone who is in a good mental space need to smoke every single day? Here is your answer. Story 25. People react differently to cannabis. Some people should never be high, while others may benefit from being high frequently. In the middle are those who enjoy it but can take it or leave it. Cannabis has negative health effects that are roughly balanced with the positive effects. It was made illegal to oppress the anti-war and civil rights movements so that prohibition should be undone. Story 26. It has a very strong, unpleasant scent. One person smokes marijuana in the park, and you can smell it everywhere. If it helps people, go for it, but personally it is not for me. Story 27. I have no problem with marijuana, but I do not like it. It does not relax me. It gives me anxiety. My children smoke occasionally. It does not bother me. They do not drink. They have experimented but do not use other drugs. That said, at your age, marijuana can have a negative effect on your brain. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical part, is not fully formed until your mid to late 20s. Story 28. 58. The last time I smoked marijuana was September of 1987. I see it as a personal choice. It needs to be legalized and taxed like cigarettes. Just be prepared to take responsibility for the increased freedom and not drive or work while under the influence. Story 29. As an addict in my 40s, I will say this. Anything can be a problem, even food. You have to ask yourself, is this a problem? Is he able to do all his duties and smoke? Or does he smoke before doing his duties? If he has to smoke to do anything, I would be questioning why. Story 30. If someone is being a productive member of society, I see no reason why it should be viewed negatively. Everyone has vices. Story 31. I have been smoking marijuana every day for 40 years. I was able to do that and be a successful member of society. I have a nice home and family and was able to retire early due to some business successes. A person who uses marijuana daily can certainly be a healthy, normal person. Story 32. I'm fine with others smoking marijuana, but if you are actually smoking it and not consuming edibles, you must do it outside. I despise the act of smoking or vaping. Story 33. From what I observe, these kinds of people always turn out as losers. No focus, no self-control, damaging their lungs and wasting their money. No personality or interesting hobbies. And then the smell. I would look elsewhere, but that is up to you. Story 34. Exactly the same as drinking. Do not do it if you are going to drive, and doing it every day is a problem. Apart from that, it is none of my business. Edit. Problem as in addiction, not as in I have a problem with it. Story 35. Honestly, I do not care. It is a vice like any other. Not my preference, but if you want to do it, go ahead. Story 36. I am totally fine with it as long as it does not adversely affect their lives, the same as alcohol. What I do not like is someone who lies around in their pajamas all day getting high or drunk. Story 37. I am a 67-year-old male who has been smoking weed off and on since I was 13. I have quit when I had a job that conducted drug testing. Currently, I am smoking it again because it relaxes me. I have never used any other drugs except those prescribed by a doctor. Story 38. As long as people are not uncomfortable with it and do not try to escape into it for too long, I do not mind. It is useful for people in pain, which is beneficial. Story 39. I personally have no problem with it, but the latest generation of marijuana users are incredibly irritating. They insist that marijuana is a magic drug with no side effects and that you are foolish if you do not use it. I feel like eventually it will become like cigarettes, where people idolize them until a study reveals harmful effects. I also dislike the smell. I was in Washington, D.C. in October and someone was smoking marijuana at the Vietnam Memorial. That was disrespectful. Story 40. Not my preference, but no shame if you indulge. However, for the love of God, if you go around smelling strongly of it, I will assume all the worst stereotypes of marijuana users about you, including the outdated and disproven ones about low intelligence and impotence. Story 41. Fine if it is something you do recreationally every once in a while. But if you do it every day and it is totally not an addiction, brother, and it is your entire personality, then you are basically just trapped in a 10th grade mentality because you think it makes you cool. Story 42. Tengo 34 años. He fumado marihuana por más de 15 años de forma regular. Trabajo en un centro de investigación. Tengo mi carrera profesional y ahora estoy estudiando la maestría. Lo veo como algo normal. Muchas personas que conozco lo hacen y no afecta en nada sus vidas profesionales o familiares. Story 43. I am 50 years old and work in management in information security. I have a great job and a great family, and I enjoy where I am in life. I mostly take gummies, but I also enjoy using my bong. Story 44. I quit over 15 years ago for a security clearance job. Now I live in a state where it is still illegal. I am personally supportive of it, but it is not really my preference anymore. I still enjoy the smell, so I give a mental high five when I smell it while out driving. Story 45. I smoke cannabis every day after dinner outside. My house does not smell like cannabis. I do not wake and bake. I do not drive impaired. I do not work impaired. Cannabis does not cure every disease on the planet, and you are not using it medicinally. I use insulin medicinally. I do not have an insulin tattoo or an insulin t-shirt, and I do not share insulin with friends at parties. It is medicine, and I take it so I do not die. I smoke cannabis because it makes office reruns funnier. It has affected my career even with all these limitations. I am a couch potato from about 7 p.m. until bedtime. I am not studying or working a second job like I used to for over a decade after quitting hard drugs to get to where I am today. But that is okay because where I am today is already comfortable. For someone who is not where they want to be, I would not recommend spending every waking hour impaired and every spare cent on using cannabis. Story 46. I have smoked every day for 20 years. It has never affected my productivity, responsibility, or safety. Everyone handles it differently, but the stoner image is largely a choice. When I started smoking daily, I was working at a Jiffy Lube where about 70% of the employees were frequently high throughout the day. I would argue we were more thorough, less careless, and less rushed to just get your car in and out. I have held a wide variety of jobs since then, and no one has ever commented on it. Story 47. I live in Virginia, in a border city near North Carolina. I can literally tell as soon as I cross the line back into Virginia because the smell of marijuana is in the air. I really wish I was making this up. I have no problem with people who use it, but this town is filled with stereotypical marijuana smokers, and they are the ones I despise. For example, hotboxing a Nissan Altima. You can smell it 6 cars away, and employees behind the Wendy's dumpster. Story 48. I view it through some rose-tinted spectacles. Edible products and oils are the way these days. All are better enjoyed when shared with my wife and followed by happy, fun times. Story 49. Do they smoke all day? Or do they smoke after all their adult responsibilities are done for the day and they are looking to unwind? If it is the first, run. If it is the second, it is probably more acceptable but expensive. Story 50. I don't mind people smoking around me. I was actually peer pressured into smoking and drinking by an old best friend when we were teenagers. I'm 30 now, and she is whatever age she is now, and she still smokes heavily. I still drink as a temporary escape from the hardships and disappointments of reality, which is how I view smoking weed as well. Just don't make it a personality trait or something your life depends on. Often when I get to work, I open the locker door and get blasted with that strong smell. I tell a couple of coworkers that they smell strong as a warning. I have a fairly strong sense of smell, and even though it is legalized in New York City, not everyone wants to smell it all the time. I often see people rolling blunts on the train, sometimes with children nearby, which is quite sad. Story 51. As long as it is not your entire personality and you can go places without getting high, it is fine by me. Story 52. I am 30 years old and have been smoking marijuana daily in the evenings after work for the past 5 years. It does not affect my work, social life, or gym routine, so the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks for me. Story 53. Similar to alcohol, occasional use is fine. However, I know a person who constantly has a cannabis vaporizer in their mouth as if it were a respirator. That is excessive. They will never be convinced otherwise because they believe it is natural. Story 54. Addiction is a real issue. Some people overcome addictive behavior and use substances without abusing them. As long as you can manage life without prioritizing your substance of choice above everything else, enjoy your life. Story 55. More and more research is emerging on the negative effects. I was addicted to it for a while, but I gave it up and felt much better. For most people, it comes down to balancing the benefits with the risks. My negative experiences were too great. Try not to abuse it. Story 56. I have no problem with it in theory, but personally, I am not into it. It comes down to the constant smell and the routine of being a smoker. Not my vibe. We would not be a good match because I would find that part of your life annoying. Story 57. It depends on what they do with the rest of the day and if they can handle going without it for days. In and of itself, I do not see it negatively. Story 58. Weed is better than alcohol. It should not be considered negative just because of what it is. If it affects the person in a negative way, whether they realize it or not, then that would be a deal breaker, obviously. Moderation is key, like with most things. Story 59. I love cannabis. I do not like how people treat it as if it is harmless, though. I would be surprised if someone can consume it daily and not have some kind of negative response to it. Story 60. It is fine if you can be responsible with it. Just like alcohol, it changes how you operate. If you know and accept your deficiencies while high and know when to use it or not, it is just fine. Story 61. I don't mind if people smoke, but I think vaping or edibles, which avoid the aroma, are probably more socially acceptable alternatives. I have consumed on and off and had a successful career as a mechanical engineer, so I don't think it impairs significantly. Consumers are much less likely to be uptight. Story 62. I kind of view it as something people do when they are immature or irresponsible. I know that is not always the case, but I know when I smoked weed every day, I surely did not tend to responsibilities, and I did not have a job that required me to be sober. Imagining smoking all day with my current life circumstances is unfathomable for me at this point. Story 63. I used to be a heavy cannabis user but stopped about 3 years ago. I have no issue with cannabis itself, but as I have gotten older, I have lost my tolerance for people who use cannabis before socializing and then lose their ability to have a conversation because they are high. If I show up to hang out with someone and they are too impaired to carry a conversation, I probably will not make the time to hang out with them again. Story 64. I am goal-oriented and working towards my future. I am married and smoke cannabis every day. I do not fit the stereotypes of a cannabis user. I have always said that you do not have to show that you do something to be able to do it. I do not understand people who smoke cannabis and suddenly feel the need to listen to reggae, wear red, yellow, and green apparel, and become a hippie. It is the same when I was a teenager and my favorite band was My Chemical Romance, but I never felt the need to be part of the emo aesthetic. I love metal but also reggaeton. You do not have to fit someone else's or your own expectations just because they do something. I also live in Spain, where many people smoke cannabis with different lifestyles and ages. Story 65. I have been a daily smoker for decades. I am a biologist and own a home. I am not going to be turning up in jail for stealing a car or something. However, I am currently on a break because it does start to cloud the mind. It is important to check in with your sober self and make sure you are not completely dependent on it. Like most things, context matters. If you sense that it is being used to escape reality, that is a problem. If it causes you to engage more deeply with reality, maybe this is not a problem at all. You know it when you see it. Story 66. Every person I have met so far who smoked cannabis, smoked a lot of it and had to mention it in every second conversation. That behavior is just annoying. I dislike all use of drugs, so it is no surprise that I also dislike cannabis. Story 67. Since my late 20s, it is much more like drinking than it used to be. In my early 20s, I would smoke almost every single night before bed. Now, it is 2 to 3 times per week with no dependence on it, more for fun before watching a good movie, playing video games, and so on. Story 68. I am 48 and smoke regularly. Not the stoner archetype that only exists in Hollywood or 16-year-old boys. I guess it's my way of coping with the world, yes. By the way, I work full-time as an information technology security expert and have a good income. Maybe that's a bit of a stereotype. Story 69. I do not enjoy smoking flower buds anymore, like regular marijuana. However, I smoke cartridges almost every day. Because they wear off much faster, at least for me, it is easier to feel in control of how much and when I am intoxicated. I have been told the smell does not linger, so I do not think I am bothering anyone by going out in public. Story 70. I am 30 years old. I smoke every day. I am about to enroll back in college to pursue my master's degree. I never smoke before or during work because I do not want it to interfere with my income. If I am home, I am either smoking or have just finished smoking. I notice both negative and positive effects, but none of the negatives are significant enough to make me quit. I can and have gone without smoking. It is not necessary. I just enjoy it. I suppose it depends on how much it affects someone's life. If it is detrimental and causes laziness or leads to harder drugs, then it is a negative. As long as smoking is not the top priority and responsibilities are managed, I do not see an issue personally. Story 71. It is simple like anything else such as drinking or eating sweets. If you do it every day, you may have a problem, barring a medical reason for pain. People use it instead of taking harmful pharmaceuticals. Story 72. It is annoying that you cannot go anywhere without smelling it these days. People were smoking marijuana at my child's softball game the other day. It has become common to partake all the time, which I find problematic. There are many good uses and responsible users, but it also comes with other downsides. Story 73. If they have a stable life, then they are fine. Cannabis is not bad if they are responsible, probably better than alcohol. Personally, after using daily for several years, I found that it affected me negatively even when sober, so I stopped. Story 74. I smoked a lot of cannabis from the time I was 15 until well into my 30s when I slowed down. These days, I am 50 now and hardly smoke at all. When I say a lot, if I wasn't at work, I was high. I never liked being high at work because I preferred to do things I enjoyed while high, and work was not one of them. I have a career, graduated with an electrical engineering degree, married, owned a couple of houses, have 2 kids, financially responsible, owned cars, the whole thing. I also played in bands, writing music, recording, and releasing it. You might be wondering, why did I stop? Partly it was having kids and not wanting to use cannabis around them in my 30s that slowed me down. It was fully illegal back then, and I didn't want to set that example. I still did use cannabis when they weren't around. What really reduced my usage was when I got divorced in my 40s. Therapy for depression led to the divorce. I stopped drinking much and using cannabis. It was largely because cannabis did not affect me the same anymore, and I had less internal desire to get high. I've concluded that I was doing it partly out of habit, and partly as a means of self-medicating for my cyclical depression. As far as self-medication goes, cannabis is pretty mild and I don't think it is a huge deal, particularly compared to alcohol or harder drugs. My only concern for you to consider is whether cannabis users are using it to avoid dealing with their problems by self-medicating. Getting high for fun occasionally may not be a way of avoiding your feelings, but heavy use is generally an indication that you could be self-medicating, and you might not even realize it. Whether or not that is problematic for you is hard to say. Sometimes things that do not seem to be a huge deal in your 20s end up turning into major issues when you get older. Story 75. I thought marijuana was for losers when I was a kid, but as an adult, I paid attention to adults around me who smoked. What I discovered was that some of the smartest people I know, including a potential Nobel Prize nominee, enjoy marijuana. It doesn't make you stupid. You just have to know what you need from it. In my 50s, I got a friend to give me some for my constant knee pain. It worked. Now, in my mid-60s, I enjoy it almost daily and have zero regrets. When you're young, it is too easy to let that stuff get on top of you. But I and my friends who use cannabis know when and how to use the drug so it works for us. Are there side effects we are not aware of? Most definitely. As a medical practitioner, I have told each of my patients that there is a cost for every single thing, food, drink, or drug you put in your body. The poison is in the dose. As I said, no regrets. Story 76. If someone is taking care of their responsibilities and handling their matters like an adult, I do not really care what they do or who they do it with, as long as it is not causing trouble for me or those I love. Story 77. I am 30 years old and have smoked every day for 8 years. The main question you should ask yourself is he productive? Is he working? Are his bills paid? As long as everything outside of cannabis is handled and taken care of, I do not see an issue. If the answer is no, then I think it is a problem. Also, do not listen to the person comparing cannabis to alcohol. That is not a fair comparison. I am impaired 60% of the day and complete my daily tasks, whereas if I were intoxicated 60% of the day, there would be no way I could function. Story 78. I enjoy smoking cannabis and smoke daily. I have a long-term girlfriend, 2 dogs, own my home, have a great career, earn considerable income, and plan to retire early at about 35 years old. I also help my parents and family. Some people react strangely when they find out I smoke. I have had a friend of a friend get upset with me for smoking before going to a party, which we took a ride-sharing service to while they drank alcohol. It's just not my preference. People should do what they want as long as it is not harming anyone. Story 79. Mid-40s. I greatly enjoy the material, but I also have responsibilities. So it is more of an occasional indulgence. I do not judge people who enjoy it, obviously, but if someone is using it every day, I would have questions. Some people are capable of using it and remaining fully functional. I am not one of those people, but I have friends like that. However, most people who believe they are one of those individuals are actually just regular users. Story 80. I do not smoke marijuana and cannot stand the smell of marijuana. It is either a vice to pass time or it has medical reasons to numb pain. Story 81. In moderation, I don't think it is a bad thing. Although they say it is not addictive, anything you do regularly that gives you a high can be addictive. I think it should have been legalized, regulated, and taxed like alcohol and tobacco years ago. I am of the older age group. Story 82. I did not start smoking until I was 28. I am 32 now. Weed is an end-of-the-night relaxation thing that has helped me wean myself off alcohol. Having dated someone who needed alcohol to function, I would choose a person who smokes marijuana over an alcoholic any day of the week. I do not rely on it, but sometimes it is nice to just relax. I am not a daily user, unless I have marijuana flower. Even then, it is a few hits off a joint to get a little buzz. Story 83, 29-year-old male. For me, there is a difference between alcohol and cannabis. While I can tolerate and drink socially and responsibly, I view cannabis and other drugs negatively, regardless of the frequency or amount consumed. Cannabis is not as harmful as heavy drugs but still has negative effects. You do you. I don't judge or care, but I wouldn't date someone who smokes cannabis even casually. I have a hard time communicating with cannabis users, and often people who smoke frequently base their personality around it. Alcohol is harmful too, no argument there, but at least there is history and craftsmanship behind various drinks and cocktails. I personally find it more attractive and pleasant to make a few Aperol spritz for my friends and relax in a chair instead of smoking blunts and lying there like saga potatoes, mumbling incoherent nonsense. Story 84. I am 42 years old. I dry vape herb occasionally, only in the evenings on weekends when I have no other commitments. I view it like having a couple of beers. No big deal. I run several businesses, have sold 2 businesses, own and manage property, have a happy marriage, and 2 children whom I actively parent alongside my wife. Like everything, there is balance. If someone is awake and bake type who needs to smoke all day, then that is a red flag, but if they appear in control of it and use it in moderation, I do not see a problem. It can help some people self-medicate for various reasons, from managing stress, anxiety, or pain to simply clearing their head after a long day and relaxing. In moderation, I view it as less harmful than alcohol. Story 85. If you smoke occasionally on a Friday evening, it is probably fine. However, smoking every day is not a good idea. You may become addicted, lazy, and boring. Story 86. In moderation, it is fine just like drinking. As long as you are not doing it during working hours, I do not see an issue with it. Story 87. You do you, but honestly, smoking is not a quality I look for in a person. For one thing, recreational drugs can become a fairly expensive activity. Personally, I would argue that money could be better spent elsewhere. Also, smoking anything is really not good for your lungs or general health. I love cardio and endurance sports, and having healthy lungs is very important for those pursuits in life in general. One could argue that smoking every day is not what people mean when they talk about moderation. Next, smoking makes renting more difficult because, depending on where you live, there are laws and clauses to protect the property and your neighbors from secondhand smoke exposure. It doesn't matter if it's tobacco or marijuana. You can always go outside to a designated smoking area to enjoy your marijuana, but depending on your location, local law enforcement might have a problem with public marijuana use. Getting kicked out of your apartment because you broke your no smoking clause in your lease agreement is unfortunate. I've even been to bars where my friends start smoking marijuana, and then the bouncer comes to kick us out, which, when you're just trying to socialize after work, is a bit of a bummer. On that topic, marijuana use can also potentially bring additional law enforcement attention, depending on the laws of your country. Let's be honest, as a general rule, the less reason you give law enforcement to interact with you, the better. Even if you are a perfectly law-abiding citizen, I would argue it's better to fly under the radar as much as possible. The more questionable activities you engage in, the more important it becomes to remain anonymous. Finally, on the topic of self-medicating, use what works for you, but most medical professionals would argue that purpose-built medications and treatment modalities are generally more effective at assisting an individual with a particular problem, such as anxiety. Medications typically have fewer negative side effects, and ideally, insurance can help cover the cost. I use the terms generally and typically because there are plenty of exceptions to this argument. Story 88. I developed an irrational dislike for marijuana after other guys badgered me incessantly in high school for not smoking. I came from a family where drug use would have meant the end of the world, so I was not even going to try it. As an adult, I have known other adults who partake occasionally but do not make it their whole personality. I know some people who take an edible or a gummy, and it is no more intrusive than alcohol. In both cases, legalities aside, I am indifferent to what adults do on their own time that does not hurt other people. However, there are plenty of people in my city who just walk around in a haze of smoke and constantly stink of weed. I judge that harshly. If I were an employer looking at new hires, I would shred the resume of anyone who came to an interview as such, just as I would if someone came in visibly drunk. Story 89. I used to smoke cannabis from my late 20s for about 10 years. It was a social activity. I mostly lived in house shares during that period, and it was almost always smoking with company. It was an easy way to connect, have a laugh, and pass the time while playing video games like Wii or FIFA. During all that time, I held down full-time jobs in my chosen profession and did not feel any stigma toward it. However, when the time came and I started living on my own, I realized that smoking alone was not the best thing, at least not for me, especially if I was financially strained. It was all I did for a while: go home, roll one, spark up, and zone out. Rinse and repeat all week. I loved getting high with friends, just not so much on my own. I had relationships where my partner did not smoke at all. Some partners did not mind, some did. I also knew plenty of older men through work who were successful in their line of work and enjoyed the occasional use. Story 90. 57 million non-drinkers, non-smokers. While I personally do not partake, I do not care if others do. However, it is extremely unpleasant to others who do not. You can smell it on everything. Side note, I believe marijuana should be federally legalized. Story 91. I have smoked cannabis since I was 16. I am 63. I have a great life, family, and career as an artist, and I smoke in the evenings for relaxation. I began taking it recreationally like most people, but now I use it as medicine. It works completely differently. I don't get intoxicated anymore. I welcome the plant spirit into my consciousness, learn from it, see through it, and feel through it. This process is quite medicinal. It reminds me of what is really important, opens my senses to new creative avenues, and regulates my appetite, mood, and sleep. I am fine with it. It works perfectly for me. Story 92. Well, the dose makes the poison. A spoonful of sawdust won't kill you if eaten, nor is it toxic, but if you eat about 10 pounds, it can be fatal. The same applies to cannabis and alcohol. Excessive amounts can harm your body. A heavy user is someone who smokes half a gram per day. The usual stereotypes about daily smokers refer to individuals who consume much more than half a gram per day. Heavy users must accept that their usage will impact different regions of their body after only a few weeks. I am in my late 30s and smoke cannabis occasionally, but I do not identify with the common stereotypes because those individuals tend to see everything negatively if they cannot smoke, which is a sign of psychological addiction. Story 93. Smoking cannabis is an unhealthy way to consume it. Heating the flower to the point of combustion releases all sorts of volatile organic compounds, which can impact your health. Vaping dry herb is healthier, but the long-term effects are still being studied. Vaping cartridges is uncertain because the additives in the oil are unknown. Edibles are better for your health than smoking or vaping. Combustion of cannabis happens at around 1000 degrees Celsius at the ember, and that high temperature destroys many of the compounds. The zone away from the ember is between 200 and 400 degrees Celsius, where the compounds are not yet destroyed and the flower is vaporized, not burned. Vaping is usually around 200 degrees Celsius, which releases the compounds without destroying them all. For pain relief from migraines, I typically vape at 176 degrees Celsius, as this provides the best relief without causing a high or filling my lungs with harmful residue. If you have a vape device, clean it and vape at 180 degrees Celsius, then clean it again. You will see there is not much tar in the device. Now vape at 210 degrees Celsius and clean it. The chamber will be thick with tar, which harms your lungs. I still vape above 200 degrees Celsius when I want to get high, but I limit how often I use it at that temperature to avoid tar buildup in my lungs. I would strictly use edibles if they worked as quickly as vaping or smoking. Story 94. I make $100,000 a year, stay fit, and socialize with my own set of hobbies. I also smoke cannabis. My most successful friend, who works at Google, smokes about 10 times more than I do. I do not know why cannabis is demonized. If you are addicted and use it all day with no ambition, then yes, it is a problem. But plenty of fully functional adults use cannabis. Story 95. Smoking weed is not bad in itself, but instead of doing that daily, people could engage in something productive every day. Besides that, it is addictive in the long term, especially with daily use. Addiction, by definition, is a harmful condition. Story 96. Senior citizen here. Cannabis has long been a part of my life, and I have zero scruples about people using it unless they have a substance abuse problem. Unfortunately, later in life it becomes increasingly advisable to give up smoking and, according to my cardiologist, vaping and move to edibles, ideally quitting altogether. I am quite healthy, but my lungs are nothing like they were decades ago, and I feel the after effects of edibles much more than when I was younger. Bottom line, socially I think it is fine, but from a health standpoint it is far from benign. Story 97. To some of us, it is a medication and we use it as such. I know many very successful people who use it daily. I recommend avoiding burning plant matter and instead using a dry vaporizer, vape pen, concentrate, or edibles. There is no reason to put smoke in your lungs. Story 98. I don't smoke because I don't want to smell like marijuana, but I view tetrahydrocannabinol usage the same as alcohol, though it is much less detrimental to your health. Story 99. I have conflicting views on it. I really enjoy it. It makes me feel good. Doing things like listening to music, going on walks, and gardening is very enjoyable while under the influence. However, it is definitely a crutch in my view and serves to smooth out the rough edges in life. It is not healthy to rely on that. I have a great job, have owned a home for over a decade, and have a family, so I feel it is easy to say you can do it while being responsible. But now, with gummies and vaping, it is almost too easy to do it. I cannot stand smoking it, so I did not do it often when that was the only method. Legalization here changed that dynamic. I personally thought I was vaping too much, so I recently stopped. We will see if I can go back to only on weekends, but as I mentioned earlier, the ease of vaping or edibles makes it almost too easy to give in to weeknight treat yourself moments. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.